Hi there, it's Helen. And if you're reading this, just know what I'm about to tell you shattered the last illusion I had about motherhood. It started with a sentence so outrageous, so entitled, that for a moment I forgot how to breathe. Mom, Clara deserves more than you. It's time you gave her the house. My son, my only child, stood in the kitchen of the home I'd lived in for 32 years, the home his father and I bought with every ounce of sacrifice we had, and told me to hand it over, just like that, like I was nothing more than a placeholder in a title deed. I didn't drop my teacup, though I think the world expected me to. I just looked at David, 38, a millionaire tech genius in polished loafers, and thought, what kind of man have I raised? Clara was perched behind him, perfectly still, like a porcelain doll brought to life by venom. She didn't say a word, just ran her manicured fingers over the marble counter, my marble counter, as if she already owned it. You live here alone, Mom, David said, as if it were a sin. You don't need all this space. Clara and I are planning a family. She deserves comfort, a home that matches who she is. I said nothing at first. Silence has power, and I needed him to feel it. He went on. You could get a nice little condo, he added, almost cheerfully. Clara found a few in that retirement complex off Maple. I held up one finger. I see, I said, slow and calm. So the woman who stopped visiting after Thanksgiving, who never once offered to help me after my knee surgery, deserves the house. And I, who scrubbed these floors and buried my husband with tears in every crack of this foundation, I get a condo. David's mouth opened, closed. Clara stepped forward, voice smooth like syrup. We're offering to take care of you, Helen. A condo would be easier. No stairs, no maintenance. You'll be happier. But they weren't offering. They were demanding. They were calculating my worth in square footage and resale value. And beneath Clara's smile, I saw the truth. This wasn't about comfort. It was about conquest. And in that moment, somewhere between insult and heartbreak, I realized the war for my legacy had begun. I smiled, and I lied. I'll think about it, I said softly, because if it's war they wanted, I'd fight it on my terms. And I've learned, gently, bitterly, fiercely, that the strongest revenge doesn't shout. It signs paperwork. That night, I lay awake in the bed Frank and I once shared, the same bed where we whispered dreams and mourned losses. My fingers traced the worn edges of the quilt I had sewn the year David went off to college, patches of old shirts, bits of hope. I stared at the ceiling and thought about my boy, my son, the baby I carried through sciatica and swollen ankles, the child I defended in playground fights, the teenager I waited up for during curfew breaches and heartbreaks. And now here he was, a man, standing in my kitchen asking for my home like it was a spare pair of socks. What had I done to make him believe I was so easily displaced? Maybe that was the hardest part, not the insult, not even the greed, but the ease with which he spoke those words, the casual cruelty, as if I were already half erased, as if the closing chapter of my life was his to rewrite. But I didn't just raise a son, I raised a storm when I needed to. The next morning, I walked through every room of that house, slowly, deliberately. My fingers brushed the banister David once slid down in Spider-Man pajamas. I paused in the kitchen where he spilled orange juice on his first day of middle school and cried from nerves. In the hallway, I touched the door frame where Frank had carved David's height year after year. I lived here. I bled and healed and laughed here. I was not a guest, I was the foundation. Still, I needed to be sure, about the law, about the deed. I found the dusty folder in my filing cabinet labeled, House Legal. Frank had always been neat. Inside, the property deed was there, clear as day. My name, only mine. After Frank died, I never remarried. No one else touched this home. Not legally, not emotionally. I was the sole owner. That fact, so simple, so absolute, settled in my chest like iron. So I made a plan. I started by calling my old friend Marion. She worked as a notary and still knew people in real estate law. I asked her about trust documents, quiet claims, inheritance clauses. She hesitated before asking, "Is someone trying to pressure you, Helen?" I told her the truth, and then some. "You don't need to give that house to anyone," she said flatly. "And if you even smell coercion, you let me know. I've seen these situations spiral." That was when I made the second call, to my bank. David didn't know I had money left. He thought the house was my only asset. But Frank was cautious. We had tucked away more than he ever let on, and I had a small investment account that paid quarterly dividends, enough to live, enough to push back. By afternoon, I'd transferred my funds to a different branch, locked it under password, and in-person verification only. I made sure the safe deposit box was no longer in my son's name. Years ago, we'd added him, just in case, I'd said. A mistake. Clara's voice echoed in my head. "She deserves more than you. Entitlement disguised as care, greed dressed up as family. They thought I was soft because I baked pies and sent birthday cards with checks. They thought they could back me into a corner with talk of downsizing and safety. But I was done shrinking, and the next time they came to visit, I'd be ready. Because I knew now that this wasn't just about a house. It was about who gets to decide when a life stops mattering. And I wasn't done mattering, not yet." David didn't come alone the next time. He brought Clara. They arrived mid-afternoon, unannounced, like royalty gracing the provinces. I watched them from the living room window as they stepped out of their silver Tesla, Clara in camel-colored cashmere and oversized sunglasses, David in a jacket that cost more than my monthly groceries. I could already smell the perfume, expensive, smug. I had just set a pot of tea on the stove. I left it boiling. When I opened the door, Clara smiled like she was being filmed. "Hi, Mother," she said. "We thought we'd surprise you." "I'm surprised," I said, my face neutral, especially since I asked for time to think. David brushed past me with the confidence of a man who expected to be obeyed. Clara followed, her heels clicking across the wood floors I'd refinished with my own hands. She didn't ask to sit, just glided into my favorite chair like it was already hers. I remained standing. David leaned on the fireplace mantel, fingers drumming. "So, have you given it some thought?" His tone was light, too light. Clara crossed her legs. "It would mean the world to us, Helen. We're not asking for a gift. We're thinking of it as a family investment. We could put your name on the new condo, and of course we'd keep you involved in everything." I tilted my head. "Involved?" She nodded, pleased with herself. "You'd still be on the title in a symbolic way, but legally, well, you understand, we'd need full ownership to take advantage of the property's equity. You know, leverage it, grow it." "Leverage," I repeated. "Grow." "Exactly," she said, beaming. David cut in, voice firmer. "We've already spoken to a financial advisor. Clara and I could refinance, maybe use part of the value to start the wellness retreat Clara's been dreaming about. She's been working so hard. She deserves this, Mom." "And what do I deserve?" I asked, my voice steady. David blinked. "You'd have comfort, security, everything you need." "Everything I need," like a bone tossed to an obedient dog. Clara stood and walked toward me. She touched my arm, light, rehearsed. "You'd still be part of our lives," she said. "We just need to know you trust us, that you're willing to support our future." The words hung there, not a request, a test, the kind they give to elderly women to see if they're still pliable. I looked at them both, then turned toward the hall. "Wait here," I said. "There's something I want to show you." I walked slowly, deliberately, into my bedroom, reached under the mattress for the slim black folder I had prepared. Inside were copies of the deed, my will, my revised power of attorney documents with David's name removed, and a letter from my lawyer friend Sheila, stating clearly that any transfer of ownership made under pressure would be contested as elder coercion. I walked back into the room, folder in hand. Clara smiled when she saw it, but when I opened it and placed it on the coffee table, her face changed. "What's this?" she asked, her voice faltering. "Facts," I said. "Truth in ink. That house belongs to me, legally, entirely, and it's staying that way. I will not be transferring anything." David straightened up. "Mom, come on. This is unnecessary." "No, son," I said softly. "What's unnecessary is you believing you can uproot me like an old tree just because your wife wants a larger yard." Clara scoffed, but it sounded more like a cough. David's hands clenched at his sides. "We came here in good faith." "No," I replied. "You came here with expectations wrapped in manipulation." I slid the power of attorney amendment toward him. "You've been removed. Effective last Thursday. I don't need you to manage anything. I never did." Clara's mask cracked then, just a flash, barely visible. But I saw it. "You're making a mistake," she whispered. "You'll regret this." "No," I said, voice like steel wrapped in velvet. "The only mistake I made was mistaking your ambition for love." And with that, I closed the folder. They left in silence. No hugs, no kisses, no smiles, just the sound of the door closing like a gavel. I sank into the sofa, heart pounding, tea still boiling on the stove, but my hands didn't tremble, because this wasn't fear. It was something else. Freedom. The silence after they left didn't feel like peace. It felt like a reckoning on its way. For 3 days I heard nothing, no calls, no texts. Then, just after sunset on the 4th evening, the doorbell rang. Not a single chime, but a long, sustained press, the kind that says I'm not here to visit, I'm here to demand. I opened the door. Clara stood there alone. She wore black, no jewelry, no gloss, no polish, just anger wrapped in silk. The mask was off now. "I need to speak to you privately," she said. No hello, no pretense. I didn't move. Then she pulled out her phone and tapped the screen. "This is a video of David. He's devastated. You've broken his heart." I didn't look. I didn't need to. "He says you've changed," she continued, "that ever since Frank died you've been paranoid, suspicious. You've pushed people away." Ah. So this was the next strategy. "Is this your angle now?" I asked. "Emotional blackmail, implying I'm unwell?" Clara stepped forward, and this time her voice was colder than a winter porch. "If you won't give us the house, we'll pursue guardianship. If a court believes you're no longer capable of making sound financial decisions, they'll assign control." I stared at her. "You think I'm afraid of court?" I said, quiet as snowfall. "You think I'll blink?" She hesitated, just for a moment. "You don't know what you're doing, Helen," she said. "You're lighting a fire you can't put out." "No," I said slowly. "I'm holding a mirror. If you don't like what you see, don't blame the glass." She left in a storm of perfume and rage, but the threat lingered. By the end of the week, an envelope arrived. A formal notice. David and Clara were requesting a court evaluation of my mental competence. I read it at the kitchen table, hands steady, heartbreaking, not because they were trying to take me down, but because he let her do it. David, my boy, the one who used to cry when I left him at preschool, the one who used to draw me crooked crayon hearts, the man who now thought the woman he married had more claim to my sanity than I did. I called Marion first. She said exactly what I feared. It's not easy to win a guardianship petition, Helen, but even requesting one causes damage. Your finances will be reviewed. Your neighbors may be asked questions. This is public. It's meant to scare you. And that's when I made a second call, to Clara's first husband. Yes, I remembered his name from a wedding invitation all those years ago, Brendan Tully, a lawyer out of Boston. I still had the name scribbled in the back of an address book. I found his office line. I told him who I was. I told him Clara's married again, and now trying to strip her mother-in-law of her home. He was silent for a long time. Then he said softly, "She did the same to my mother." And the rest came like a flood. She'd tried to get his mother's property in Maine, claimed it would be for a family vacation home. When the paperwork didn't go through, she cut her off, blocked her, told people she was senile. She had a pattern. She circled women past 70, like a hawk circles small mammals. Brendan agreed to send me a written affidavit. "You're not crazy," he said. "You're just in her way." That night, I sat with the letter in my lap, shaking, not from fear, from fury. Because now, it wasn't just about saving my house, it was about saving me, my dignity, my truth, my name. David wanted to pretend this was just a misunderstanding, but his silence had become its own betrayal. By Monday, I'd hired a lawyer of my own, and we were ready. If Clara wanted to put me on trial, I'd show the judge exactly who was unstable in this family, and I'd do it with more than words. I'd do it with evidence. The courthouse smelled like paper and cold air, that sterile, heavy kind of quiet where lives shift on the backs of documents and decisions. I sat in a navy suit I hadn't worn since Frank's funeral. It was loose now, my body smaller, but my spine had never felt straighter. Across the room sat Clara in cream wool, all elegance and performance. David next to her, jaw tight, hands folded like a schoolboy who didn't know which parent he'd disappointed more. My lawyer, June Padilla, rested a hand on mine. "You ready, Helen?" I nodded. "Let's turn on the lights." The judge, a small, wiry woman with eyes that missed nothing, called the hearing to order. Clara's lawyer began first. "Your Honor, we present this petition for temporary guardianship based on concerning behavioral changes in the respondent, Mrs. Helen McCarthy. We believe Mrs. McCarthy is being financially manipulated by outside parties and is no longer making sound decisions regarding her estate." He gestured toward Clara with the gentle concern of a seasoned manipulator. "My client, as her daughter-in-law, is only trying to ensure her safety and stability." Clara dabbed her eye with a tissue that looked brand new, perfume-heavy, stage-ready. I said nothing, but June stood. She was composed, her voice calm and clear. "Your Honor, we will refute these claims in full, and we will do so with documented proof of manipulation, a history of financial targeting, and a pattern of coercive behavior that does not belong to my client, but to the petitioners themselves." She walked over to the evidence table. Exhibit A, the full deed to the property in question, showing sole ownership by Helen McCarthy since 1991. Exhibit B, text messages and emails from Clara Hayes, including one where she says, and I quote, "We just need to get her to sign it. Once she's in the condo, it's done." There was a shuffle behind me. Gasps. Clara's lawyer stood, objecting, something about context. Overruled. Exhibit C, June continued, a sworn affidavit from Brendan Tully, Clara's ex-husband, detailing an eerily similar pattern of behavior with his own mother. At that, Clara stiffened. Her mask cracked. Not much, but enough. "And finally," June said, her voice tightening, "we present a recorded conversation, obtained legally, between Mrs. McCarthy and Clara Hayes, in which Ms. Hayes directly threatens to pursue guardianship if Mrs. McCarthy refuses to sign over her property. The judge raised an eyebrow. "You have this recording?" June nodded. "It's cued and time-stamped. We request it be played in full." And then the courtroom filled with Clara's voice. "If you won't give us the house, we'll pursue guardianship. You're lighting a fire you can't put out." Silence followed. Deep, embarrassed, exposed. David stared at his wife. His expression, not anger, not rage, recognition. The moment a man sees the woman he married for, who she really is. The judge looked at Clara. "Ms. Hayes, would you like to respond to this recording?" She stood. Her voice shook. "She's old. She's confused. She misunderstood me." The judge turned to me. "Mrs. McCarthy, do you wish to say anything before I rule?" I stood, slowly, clearly. "I may be old, Your Honor, but I am not confused. What I am is done. I raised a son who forgot that love isn't measured in square footage. I welcomed a woman into my home who treated kindness like currency, and I am not crazy or fragile or manipulatable. I am simply a mother who knows when she's being used." I looked at David then, held his eyes. "I loved you every day of your life. I cannot say the same for the way you've loved me in return." Then I sat down, and the judge ruled, petition denied, legal rights restored, no grounds for guardianship. Clara slumped in her chair. David covered his face with his hands. I walked out alone. But I didn't feel alone. I felt visible again. The wind was sharp as I stepped out of the courthouse, but I didn't feel it. My bones were still humming with something warmer. Not triumph exactly, something quieter, heavier. Justice. Clara and David didn't follow me. They didn't speak to me. They didn't even look my way as I crossed the plaza. I think they were still waiting for the judge to change her mind, for the spell to unbreak. But spells only work when someone stays asleep, and I was wide awake now. That evening I brewed a pot of strong tea. The good kind, the one Frank used to save for anniversaries. I poured it into my favorite chipped mug and sat by the window, the same one I used to watch David run past on his way to school. I thought about how much of motherhood is invisible. All the things they never see. The notes in lunch boxes, the sleepless nights, the mortgages quietly paid, the birthdays remembered when no one remembers yours, and then they grow up. And sometimes they forget you're still a person. The next few days were quiet. My phone didn't ring, no knocks at the door. The neighborhood was still, as if the world had paused to let me catch my breath. Then, 5 days later, a letter arrived. Not an email, not a text, a real letter. It was from David, handwritten. I read it in the garden. "Mom, I don't know where to start." I watched the recording again. I heard her voice. I heard mine, and I saw you, really saw you. Maybe for the first time in years. I don't know when I started believing Clara's version of you. Maybe because it was easier than admitting I'd become a man who wanted more than he deserved. You gave me everything, and I gave you pressure, doubt, silence. I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I remember now. The way you used to sing while packing my lunch. The way you always kissed my forehead, even after I was too old for it. You were never small, Mom. I just stopped looking. She's gone. She left yesterday, took what she could, including the Tesla. I told her I wouldn't chase her. I don't want the house. I just want a seat at your table, even if I have to earn it again. Love, David. I folded the letter with trembling hands. Not from weakness, from weight, the kind of weight that comes when grief and hope sit side by side. I didn't write back. Not yet. Instead, I pulled out an old recipe card, one I hadn't touched in years. David's favorite, honey-glazed chicken. On Sunday, I opened every curtain in the house, let the light in. I set the table with real cloth napkins, lit candles that smelled like cinnamon. I wore a dress that made me feel beautiful. And at 6:45, I heard a knock. Just one. When I opened the door, David stood there. No wife, no designer jacket, just my son, eyes red-rimmed, holding a bouquet of sunflowers. "They reminded me of you," he said, and I let him in. That night, we didn't talk about Clara, or court, or deeds. We just ate, slowly, like time had been given back to us. Before he left, he stood in the doorway for a long time. "Can I come next week, too?" he asked. I nodded. "Bring dessert," I said. He smiled, a real smile, not the one he wore for cameras or clients, the boyish one, the one I remembered. And when the door closed behind him, I didn't cry. I just exhaled. Because sometimes the things we fight for the hardest, respect, dignity, truth, come back not as fireworks, but as a quiet knock on your front door.